What's going on YouTube? My name is Trey Kepsel and this is Elk Motorsport. On today's video, I'm going to be showing you a product review and installation of the Zuks Offroad seat swap that is from the Chrysler Town & Country second row fold and stow seats. I know that I already have these seats installed, but it's a really nice modification. They're extremely comfortable, and I figured that it would be really nice to show you guys everything that it entails. It's not very hard to do, but I'll give you all a step-by-step, all the tools you're gonna need, and give a comparison of the stock seats to these seats. So let's get to it. So right here, I've got the seats from the Chrysler Town & Country. They're actually the seats from the second row. They're the fold and stow seats. As you can see, they collapse all the way down into a little cube, and in the back of that minivan you can remove the covering of a compartment and they will fold all the way down in, and then fully opened up, this is what they look like. With the kit, Zuks Offroad sends you these H-beam brackets. They don't come painted. I had mine powder coated. I had a whole bunch of stuff I had to have powder coated, so I just had them powder coated. The hardware that comes in the kit are 4 bolts, 2 nuts, and a set of washers, bolts, lock washers that aren't in here right now. I didn't use them, I used Loctite, and some nuts. These two are to secure the seat belt latch to the seat, which is down in this hole right here. Some of the tools that you're gonna need: a nut driver if you have it, or you can just use a ratchet. 1/4 inch is big enough for everything you're going to do. You need a 10mm socket. You can use a deep 12 or a shallow 12 or both, a 13mm and a 14mm, a 12mm wrench, 2 10mm wrenches, and to put the seat belt on, I actually just use 2 adjustable wrenches. I also advise putting some washers on this hardware right here for the bracket, so that way you can evenly distribute the clamping force of the nuts and bolts. And then for the original seat sliders, you can use the original hardware that's on them. They are relatively short though, so something that I want to do is I'm going to replace those M6 by 1.0 thread pitch bolts with some longer ones. I'm going to use some washers, and then I have some nuts that actually have some locking plates inside of them. So, like I had said earlier, I had actually already had these seats in the truck, but I just put my factory seats back in, took these out as if I were to receive them from Zuks Offroad, so that way we could do this. Now I'll show you what the stock setup should look like. This is what your stock arrangement should more or less look like, minus the center console, or if you already have a center console. These seats, they look relatively nice. When I got the truck, they were actually reupholstered already. The passenger seat is actually pretty comfortable, but this seat was all deteriorated and it was very uncomfortable. I actually pulled the back off, pulled this cover off, pulled the old foam off, bought some foam from I think Joann's or Hobby Lobby, and I tried to remake it, but the problem that I kept running into is back here, there's a beam part of the framing and it would hit my tailbone. So this actually still was very uncomfortable. So I opted for these seats, and I'll show you why. Here's a comparison of the stock seat versus the Chrysler Town & Country seat. You can actually see the inlay of the metal coils that are what support your weight. And this foam is not nearly as dense as this foam. This foam is actually denser, but it's softer to the initial touch, kind of like memory foam is. Here are the factory sliders. When I pulled these out, I actually don't have a cable that's running from one side to the other to adjust these sliders, which isn't a big deal with the new seats because the new seats have a slider built on them. So when you put the factory sliders on, you don't make the adjustment here. You can just scoot them all the way back. And then with this, you can actually even go back farther. So it's a lot nicer if you're taller for additional legroom. And because these sliders sit on these H brackets that sit on top of these sliders, it actually elevates you a little bit more, a couple of inches. So that's actually nice too. So you're not sitting as low with the stock seats in the Samurai. So I'm gonna start by pulling the sliders off of the passenger seat. With this one, the way these sliders are positioned, you're better off using a 10mm wrench or a 10mm ratcheting wrench. This right here is the pull lever for if you're in the back seat, so that way you can pull this and the seat will fold down and slide forward. To remove this out, you would have, I don't even know how you would get that off, to be honest with you. All I did, because it's locked in there on a ball and a cord, I just cut the cable, and then you just undo these nuts with a 10mm or one of the nuts, and then it will just slide off. So now with the driver's seat, the setup's a little bit different. You can actually get to it with a ratchet or your nut driver and a 10mm socket. And then you will have to adjust the slider to get to the rear bolts. So this is what I wanted to show you. The factory M6 by 1.0 thread pitch bolt is really short. You can get away with using it, but I'm just opting for a little bit longer hardware, same size bolt and thread pitch. So I'm gonna start with the driver's side first. The H brackets are not oriented driver's side or passenger side, only the sliders are. You'll notice that these sliders have a cutaway, so that way you can gain access to the underside of these bolts. This is the side that will bolt to the seat because this hole right here is larger to give you access to the bolt and the nut. So you'll set it down with these larger holes facing up, and then you'll set your sliders on top. So this is currently upside down. For my orientation, the actual adjuster for sliding the stock slider is on my left-hand side. So when you flip this over, this will be on the driver's side closer to the center of the truck, which is where it was originally. And this slider without the adjustment bar or lever is on my right-hand side. The easiest way to do it, kind of bring it to the edge of your workbench. These aftermarket bolts, which you can pick up at O'Reilly's, that's where I get them. They have that flat washer built into it. They're a 10.9 strength. They have different lengths. These are 20mm, I believe. So you take your bolt, drop it through here on the bottom side, put your washer and your nut, Reach in through that groove with the open end of the wrench and zip it down. Also make mention that these holes on these brackets, the purpose of this center section on the H bracket is to keep them spaced. The holes on this H bracket on the outermost piece, they are just the right size. So you don't have to worry about orienting this slide on the bracket. It is already spaced appropriately, so that way these brackets will bolt in the factory spot. The only adjustments you make are actually on this H-beam bracket to the aftermarket seat. Now with these two sides done, you'll need to adjust your slider to expose the other hole. Now it is worth mentioning, you will want to use the open side because on some of these cutouts, if you use the close end and you run this bolt up through there, your wrench is going to get stuck in there, and then you're going to have to back it back out, pull it out, use the open end. So just start off by using the open end so that way you don't get yourself in a bind like that. And the driver's side H-beam bracket and sliders are done. Now let's move to the passenger side. Using the same method that we used on the driver's side, you'll take that slant with the opening on the outermost hole, point it down. Your passenger side bracket is in the exact same orientation as the driver's side. Instead of the adjustment bar being on the innermost part of the Samurai, it's on the outermost. It's like that, I suppose, for right-hand dominant people to reach down, use their right hand to pull the lever and move it back and forth. You'll put this side with the bar on my orientation right-hand side, and then the side without the bar on the left-hand side. Bring it a little bit to the edge so you can get access. Take your 20 millimeter long M6 by 1 point thread pitch bolts. Push it through to the bottom. Put your washer and put your nut on the end. I'm gonna go ahead and do this to all four corners just because these sliders sit higher than the driver's side, and it just makes it a little bit more stable so you don't have to worry about one falling over, and since you're on the edge of a workbench to kind of reach in there, it won't become unbalanced and fall off. Kind of like that one just did. So because of the design of these sliders, you're going to have to use 2 wrenches. Same as before, use your open end on the bottom with the slot so that way you don't get in a bind. And just start wrenching it down. So now that we have both sliders done, now all that's left is to attach the seats to the H-beam brackets. With the driver's seat upside down, you'll know it's a driver's seat because the actual adjustment for leaning back, you want it to be on your right-hand side, so that way when the seat is flipped over, it'll be on the left-hand side, which will be on the outside most part of the Samurai. And your seatbelt bracket is here on your left-hand side. Take your bracket, this slider adjustment bracket will be on the same side as the seat belt, which is your right hand side when it's orientated correctly. The only step that I'm going to skip, it marked on the H-beam bracket from the powder coat getting a little marred up, is actual side to side adjustment. As you can see, there's a lot of adjustment that you can give this seat. I have it already set from having it previously installed, so I will be compensated for my center console. And something that I like to do with these bolts that come included with this kit is I will take medium strength Loctite and I will run it on the threads, so that way I don't have to worry about them backing out. You have to provide your own washer, which is a good idea, being how these slots are all grooved open for this side to side adjustment. But whenever you would do this without having it marked, you would just run them down till they're just barely touching, where you could still move this around but with a little bit of effort, so that way you can flip them, put them in there, and then you can shimmy the seat side to side to get your spacing, and they're just tight enough to where they'll hold it when you pull it back out. And this hardware, because it's an American vehicle and they don't use the same sizing that Japanese vehicle use, this is actually a 13mm socket. And now the passenger seat, have your tilt adjustment on your left hand side with the front slider facing farthest away from you forward. Take your slider with the factory sliders facing up. You'll place them on the farthest back stud. Put your Loctite and your washers. And you're done. Now all we need to do is we need to pull the seatbelt latch out of the Samurai and attach it to these new seats. These guys right here are a 14mm. So I got the seat with the opening for the seatbelt latch closest to me on the edge. Inside here, there is a push pin. All you have to do is grab the plastic and pull it right out. There are two of these. The second one is farther down right there. And now you have enough space to access the hole right here for the seatbelt latch. With the supplied hardware, washer on the bolt, take your latch, button facing towards you, run it through here. Now, there are some threads inside this hole. They're not exactly the same size as this bolt. So when you thread it in, you'll feel it's real loose, which is fine because you have a supplied nut that's gonna take care of that play. Take some Loctite, put down the threads, and then run your nut on. Now this is where I just use 2 adjustable wrenches. So I don't know the nut size. I think they're standard. That's why I didn't really mess with them. I just grabbed these and it was sufficient enough. Just hold the bolt in place and run that nut down. Now when you put this back on, this piece of plastic curves right here. It is getting hung up on the mounting spot for that bottom plastic clip right there. So just kind of push it back around. It'll want to go around that piece of metal right there. So you'll just pull it out and then back around. And then you'll see that that plastic metal clip wants to go in. And it will go right in. And then take your upper mount, line up with the hole, and bam. There you go, done. Painless. And we'll do the other one to the other seat. Pull your top one out first, and then your second one. Get your hardware ready. Button on the latch facing towards you. And just thread the nut through these loose threads. Now, it is worth mentioning that this seatbelt latch, you should angle it in a way that's going to be ergonomic to buckling in the seatbelt. Because when you latch it down, it's going to kind of just be right where you set it. Get some Loctite. See, I can use the seat slider to slide this H bracket out of my way with my adjustable wrenches and tighten them down. Now, like before, pull that piece of plastic out around that metal, put in that first clip and then this farthest clip from the buckle. And now your seats are ready to go back in the Samurai. This part right here is where you would put the bolts in real loose, and then you would adjust it side to side to make sure that this side isn't interfering with the door shutting, and your middle is where you want it. If you wanted to, you could scoot it more over. So this armrest, these armrests, when you fold them down, they actually protrude out as they twist down, so they get wider. They collapse in whenever you fold them up, so when you fold and go, they'll fit in there. One other thing that I will have to show you, whenever you put the back bolts in on the driver's side, you have to move the aftermarket seat slider all the way forward, and then you have to take your factory sliders and you'll have to slide it all the way forward. So that way you can expose those rear holes. The seat is all the way in the rear position. Grab the bar for the aftermarket seat slider, slide it forward, and then get your slider on your factory sliders and slide the seat the rest of the way. And then you'll have access to these two rear holes. And these are a 12mm. You can take your factory slider, slide the seat all the way back, and then you can slide your aftermarket seat all the way back. And as you can see, it allows you to slide all the way to where the seat will actually contact the body, which is a lot farther back than the factory slider does. Now, something I'm going to do different is I'm going to put some of these riv nuts in these holes, so that way I don't have to try to hold a bolt from up top and screw a nut on the bottom. So that's what I'm going to do right now. And just so you know, the riv nut that you're going to use, if you decide to do it this way, is an M8. That's what size bolts these are. Doing the exact same thing that you did on the driver's seat, you'll slide the aftermarket seat slider all the way forward. Right behind here, you'll notice you can lift this tab. That's what you'll have to do to get the access to this bolt in this hole. And you'll have to use a box-in wrench to drive these. It's also valuable to keep in mind not to run these bolts all the way down just yet. Get them started, all 4 of them. That way all your holes line up. Now take your factory slider, slide it all the way back, take your aftermarket slider all the way back, and flip up your new seats. There you have it. Nice, new, comfortable seats. Now all that's left to do is reattach your door straps. A little bit more information on those seats, guys. He has that same seat kit, but in black leather, so it runs about $400. It is cheaper if you can just get the cloth seats. He does have brackets that if you do not have the stock Samurai sliders, you can use those seats and they'll bolt directly into the floorboard. There are some slight modifications that you need. He also has the H-beam bracket for sale, just the H-beam bracket if you feel that you have access to some seats that could utilize that setup. He even has a mounting system that lets you put Chrysler Pacifica seats in the Samurai. That does it for this video. If it was content that you enjoyed watching, hit a like. If you haven't already subscribed, be sure to subscribe so that way you can stay up to date on what I've got going on in the shop. And I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.